the doctor was looking at the X-ray, and I asked him, what do you see? And he kept on looking at the X-ray, as he said en French to me, I see bones, I see gizzard and bones, and a few kidney stones. Among the lovely bones, I see hips and 14 pepper clips, 3 asparagus tips. Among the lovely bones, I see things on your peritoneum that belong on the British Museum. I see your spine, and your spine looks divine. Is exactly like mine. Now doesn't that seem strange? And guys, you use the pay telephone. There's $2 and change among your lovely bones. C'est bon, c'est bon. C'est bon, c'est bon. Oh, hello there, nurse. Come over here and look at this X-ray. It's really remarkable. Look at this. Now, isn't the lumbar vertebrae supposed to be connected to the clavicle? I know, but with Scotch tape. Hey, look what's in there. Look at that. It's a stamp. That's a 1922 McKinley ultramarine blue with imperfect perforation. I have to get that out and put it in my collection. Look in there. That's printing. What does it say in there? You see. US certified grade A. Look at this, fascinating. See those little round things. Do you know what those are? Those are M&Ms. Those people are right. They don't melt. Among the lovely bones. Oh. Hello there, it is I, moi, Dr. Jimmy, and... Oh, wait, sorry. This is the wrong fake accent. Excuse me. Got to get the frog out of my throat. Oh, boy, that's a bit rude. All right, back again. I am now back to my normal... I should say my usual abnormal accent. This is Dr. Jimmy, and today I will be presenting what I think is my 4th video for the history of the event Halloween Horror Nights 25. That wonderful event that occurred back in the year 2015 at Universal Studios, Florida. But first, of course... Oh yes, I must tell you, I sang that funny French song for no reason whatsoever. Well, no good reason. Yes, for no good reason. Now, let me show off the T-shirt. People always want to see what I'm wearing. Maybe I'll fool you all and show up nude in one of these. Oh, no, don't do that. No, some things cannot be unseen. No, this is a Bill and Ted Halloween Adventure cast and crew shirt from Halloween Horror Nights 7 in the year 1997. But it says Bill and Ted 6. Yes, of course it was, because the first show was in 92. Therefore, the 6th Bill and Ted was in 97 at Halloween Horror Nights 7 Frightmares. And the back is rather nifty. I hope you can see it. Let me try to get myself centered in the image so you can see the back. It's rather nifty. Final Frontier. They did a lot of parodies of the Batman movie that year and the Star Trek movie that year. So there we go. Well then, that's all out of the way. Let's go back to 2015, shall we? But before I get into the 3rd haunted house that year, I covered the first 2 already in previous videos. Before I get to the 3rd haunted house, I realised now that I forgot to talk about my lovely cocktails that I had prepared for the haunted houses that year. Now, let's find the right photo album. Let's see here, that's not it. Albums on my iPhone here. HHN 25 house cocktails. So, I previously talked about 2 haunted houses already. Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem, and An American Werewolf in London. But what I forgot to mention when I talked about those 2 houses were the cocktails. Yes, as you are aware, I tried to create, since 2011, I've been making cocktails for all the haunted houses at Horror Nights. And back in 2015, I was the last year that I actually made them on site at Finnegan's Bar and Grill. I didn't make them. I told the bartender what I wanted, and the nice, lovely bartenders like Jan and Roxy and the other lovely people, and Jim and Glenn, the lovely people at Finnegan's Bar and Grill would come up. I think there's one named Sarah. I don't remember all their names, but they make lovely cocktails for me every year. At least they did back when I still had them done there. Last year I chose to make them at home. I could have a wider range of ingredients, you see. And I'm doing that again this year. But back in 2015, I was still limited to what they actually had at the pub at Universal. It was the best I could do then. And for Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem, a retrospective house covering all those horror nights, I thought I'd have a retrospective cocktail. You see, there was a signature drink every year since 2005. They have a signature drink that's usually served in a blinky cup. In 2005, for Halloween Horror Nights 15, they had the first of these. It was called Bloodberry Wine. Yes, and it was served in a blinky cup. I still have my Halloween Horror Nights 15 blinky cup, and it still blinks, which is amazing, since I've had some others from more recent years that don't work anymore. I guess they made batteries better in 2005, I guess. But anyway, the drink called Bloodberry Wine is pretty much the same drink they had every year since then, all the way up to 2014. And it was based, and for many years when I'd attend the event with that silly fellow, Chris, calls himself Redfield, but that's not his real name. We used to get our blinky drinks, but sometimes when you got the blinky drinks, and he would point out, you know, it might be called Liquid Fear in 2010, or they come up with another name, you know, some kind of luck drink the next year, but it was always the same basic drink. They might change one ingredient. Usually the energy drink that was added to it got switched around sometimes, but it was still basically the same drink year after year, the same pink mixtures of juices and rums. And we got it at the outdoor bars, but for a blinky cup. But after our first one, we thought, geez, these aren't so good because they seem to be watered down a little bit. Sometimes you almost get no alcohol. And we thought, we've got a good idea. We'll find out what's in the thing, go to Finnegan's and have them make it for us there. And the nice bartenders always made it quite stronger and much better. And that's what we started doing as a tradition. So we get our first one to get the blinky cup. Then we take the cup to Finnegan's and have it refilled with what they made for us from scratch. So that's what we did for years. And it was appropriate that I decided to resurrect that cocktail in 2015 because that was the year that was no longer the signature drink. They came up with an entirely new signature drink for the anniversary that was whiskey based and was sort of green in color. And last year they had another signature thing for Chance that was even more. I think they had more than one, and again it wasn't the old one. So the cocktail they had for all those years, for about 10 years then, from 2005 to 2014, and then they stopped doing it. So it was a good thing to resurrect it as the special cocktail for Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem, a retrospective cocktail for a retrospective house. Now, using the very same recipe that Chris and I had gotten from the people who put the drink together and took to Finnegan's. It takes 3 kinds of rum. Captain Morgan, Myers, and Malibu. And then orange and pineapple juices, some grenadine to give it color, and Monster Energy drink. The basic recipe for the signature HHN drink since 2005, when it was called Bloodberry Wine, a recipe that finally changed that year. So here it is, how it looked, the retrospective cocktail for Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters of Mayhem, garnished with some lime, I believe, served up like this. You can see it there, how it looks. And you can probably still get that pretty easily because Jan especially, and some of the others, Roxy, had made the cocktail so many times for Chris and myself for years and years. They kind of know, if you ask for, you know, the thing Dr. Jimmy and Chris always got, they can usually figure it out. But otherwise, I gave you the recipe so you can tell them if you want to try it. If you are of legal drinking age. And always drink responsibly. Disclaimer there. Now, the second cocktail from that year was, of course, for An American Werewolf in London. I've already talked about the house, but I didn't tell you about the cocktail. And again, that time, it was a repeat of a house that had been there a couple of years before. So would I make the same cocktail again? No, I had to come up with a completely new cocktail. The one I did in 2003 had been, I'm not 2003, 2013. That cocktail had been a try to, you know, I tried to mix up a couple of ingredients. It didn't work out as nicely as I wanted to. And I thought maybe I'd come up with a better plan this time. And I thought about, you know, America and England, and I thought about British drinks, and I thought about a thing called a shandy. A shandy is a British drink. It was traditionally a children's drink. It's a mixture of beer and lemonade. By lemonade, I'm not talking about what Americans call lemonade. No, 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 no. What British people call lemonade is a fizzy drink. It's a soda pop, whatever you want to call it, soda pop, fizzy drink, that's lemon flavored. It's similar to something like Sprite or 7-Up, except it doesn't have any lime in it. It's just lemon pop, basically. So that's mixed with a little bit of beer, and it usually has just a little bit of alcohol, and it was considered appropriate in olden times for children to drink this. By olden times, I mean not so long ago. I think the drinking laws in England have changed a bit since then. I think you have to be at least 16 to order something like that in a pub, maybe even older now. Of course, in the United States, you couldn't have one unless you're 21 years old. And I thought about the children's thing because there's so many interesting, creepy little British children running around American Werewolf. You almost forget about that. But there's the two little creepy girls with their little terrier. Remember, the dog growls and snaps and barks at Jack when he's caught outside Alex's flat and he's barefoot and he's trying to figure out how to get back in. And it's like the dog is growling and the girl is giggling at him. Sort of reminds you of the Grady twins from The Shining. And why did I mention The Shining? Well, we know why I mentioned The Shining. Go on and announce it already, damn you! Everybody knows. Enough of that. All right. Getting back to the American Werewolf. There's also that. There's also the little boy in hospital. The little boy in hospital who says no to everything, and Alex says, "Oh, should I beat you about the head and shoulders with an anvil?" And he's no, no, no. Yes. And then there's that really little boy that sort of reminds you of little Damien Thorne from The Omen. He's wearing his little school outfit with his little cap out in the zoo, and the naked American man steals his balloons. So thinking about all the kids that are in this movie, strangely enough, I thought maybe a kid's drink might be fun for American Werewolf, just to make it a bit different. And so I came up with the idea of making a killer shandy. Yes. It says here, An American Werewolf in London, a killer shandy make you feel like a naked American man stole your balloons. Basically, it was lemonade, but not the fizzy kind, because they don't have that in the United States. So I chose actual lemonade. A lemonade with Jack Daniels. Why did I pick Jack Daniels? Because it's an American ingredient, right? And also the name Jack is appropriate for American Werewolf, because of course David's friend Jack, keeps popping up throughout the movie. And the other ingredient was London Dry Gin. So it's got London gin and American whiskey and lemonade, so it becomes a killer shandy with both an American and a British ingredient. And this is what it looked like, garnished with a slice of lemon. So that was my cocktail for the second go-round of American Werewolf in London back in 2015. So now I've caught up with showing you the cocktails that I had made up at Finnegan's for those two haunted houses. And now, at last, halfway through the video, I can get on with the third haunted house of Halloween Horror Nights 25. And this was another IP, or intellectual property house, like Werewolf was. Another motion picture based house. And it was called Freddy Vs Jason. And it was the first of two haunted houses to be in Soundstage 24 that year. Based primarily on the motion picture Freddy vs. Jason, but also based on previous films in both the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th franchises as well. And to talk about this, I'd probably spend an awful lot of time digressing before we get into the house. I may not even get to it in this video. Oh dear, you're warned. But yes, Freddy and Jason, of course, were no strangers to Horror Nights when they showed up in 2015. Indeed, both of them made their first unofficial appearance at Horror Nights in Orlando in 1992. Not even a straight appearance, mind you, but in parody. Yes, all camping up in parody in that year's debut performance, the debut performance of Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. Performed only a few times, because there was only 5 nights of that whole event, in 1992. And if you recall, you're old. But if you don't, and you just need to be told about it, they showed up as some of the bad guys that Black Bart had summoned to harass Bill and Ted and Dr. Emmett Brown in that very first version of the show, along with the Terminator. And it was done really, really parody. In fact, they weren't quite right. Jason had a chainsaw. That's not his weapon. He should have a machete, right? You get a chainsaw. What's it do? A chainsaw. It's Leatherface's weapon. And Freddy, I think he had 2 gloves instead of 1, maybe. It was something weird about it. And he had black and white striped shirt instead of green and red. I don't know why. And wearing sunglasses for some reason. But we still knew it was Freddy and Jason, obviously, who they're supposed to be. After that, they made actual appearances, but still a bit unofficial. In other words, because, of course, in those days, in the 1990s, Universal didn't bother with, actual securing of the rights to properties that they have there, and they figured, we'll just throw them in. People know who they're supposed to be. The first time I think they really appeared was in 1995 at the house called Universal's House of Horrors. At the event in 1995, Halloween Horror Nights 5, Curse of the Crypt Keeper. And that house had seen some different horror movies, including one that was pretty much, Jason, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street type scenes. No explanation necessary. You knew what you were seeing. They didn't. They popped up again in 98 in that haunted house called the Museum of Horrors. Just like the previous house, they had one side classic monsters, one side modern horror films, and that one they didn't have scenes in the house because they had other movies there, but they did pop up as part of a sort of museum display of slashers standing on pedestals that might have been mannequins, but on the way out you pass them again and one of them comes after you. But that same year, they were also roaming through the streets as street characters or scare actors in various scare zones. And in fact, Freddy Krueger popped out a startling guess in what was the the midway of the Bazaar scare zone that year. What's he doing in the midway of the Bazaar in Amity? They're supposed to be clowns, but Freddy was there popping out. I guess he can pop up anywhere he wants to. He's a nightmare. And so he popped up and scared guests there as well. So they were popping around. Of course, they made a bigger, much better appearance in 2003, if you remember. And the very first all-night die-in house, that was the Icon House for the director in Halloween Horror Nights 13 at the Islands of Adventure. So they showed up over there. In that house, they both had full scenes representing their movies in a haunted house of different horror movies, again. But it was in 2007, of course, that they made their biggest splash at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando, when they each got their own house. That was the first time they appeared in a more official capacity, because at this point, Universal realized they had to get secure film rights. They had to secure the copyrights before they used these sorts of characters. It was in order to prevent any trouble, and so they went ahead and they got the rights to the franchises and did the 2 haunted houses from that year. You might remember The Nightmare on Elm Street Dreamwalkers and Friday the 13th Camp Blood. Both very delightful. Now, when they had first found out they got these characters for Horror Nights back in 2007, a lot of people in art and design were really excited. And one of the things they wanted to do was to put them head to head. Freddy versus Jason. Oh yeah, because the movie had come out a few years before, and that is something guests like to see, Freddy and Jason going after each other. Of course, what fun! And they intended to do that. They had originally planned for there to be a Jason cameo in the Nightmare on Elm Street house. When you go through the boiler room, originally there was going to be a sort of cell in the boiler, and Jason would be in there, like, trapped by Freddy. And I think Freddy might have shown up as an evil camp counselor or something in the other house. I don't know for sure about that, but there were plans to mix them up a little bit, give them cameos in each other's houses, and also there was going to be a scare zone in the Shrek Alley area, where now we always see Transformers meeting and greeting people and donkey shows. No, not that sort of donkey shows. But anyway, in that area, they haven't had a scare zone there in a few years, but back then they were going to put one in. It was going to be one featuring both Freddy and Jason, and they would be, you know, doing at each other. It was going to be a Freddy versus Jason sort of scare zone. And so this was part of their whole shtick. But New Line Cinema, who of course had them sign these contracts, part of the contract deal was you can use these characters along with Leatherface, but there was a stipulation. None of the 3 characters could appear at the same time together at Horror Nights itself. Oh, bugger! Yes, they could appear together only in promotional advertising for the event. So they could be up on the billboard together, they could be on the brochure together, they could be in a television commercial together with Jack, of course, lovely. But when it came time to go into the parks, they were separate and kept apart. So even when they had that opening ceremony where they introduced them one at a time on the stage, it was done one at a time on the stage. So Jason attacks someone on the stage, he leaves. Then Freddy shows up, he leaves. Leatherface, then he leaves. They weren't ever on the stage at the same time for that opening ceremony. Furthermore, the houses were entirely separate, and they weren't allowed to be doing any kind of photo ops together. You know, Jason putting his arm around Leatherface and Freddy and the guest in between them. They couldn't do that. They wanted to do stuff like that. They couldn't. So nothing completely separated. It was part of the contract. So they didn't have a chance to bring Freddy and Jason together. And that was sad, unfortunate. But finally, in 2015, they were able to get the rights to Freddy vs. Jason and to bring the two of them together at Horror Nights at last. Now, further digressing about the characters themselves. The older of the two characters is Jason Voorhees, although, and that's by when the films first came out. I think chronologically the characters, Freddy would actually be older than Jason, but it's hard to tell because when was Jason born? Originally he's born in the 40s, and maybe he's a lot older than, he was like 30-something, or 29, 30 years old or something in 1980 or 1981 when he first appears as an adult. But then they kind of pushed that date back and forward through time. We know he was born on a Friday the 13th. But the first film, Friday the 13th, Jason is just barely in the movie at all. He's a boy who had some mental disabilities. It's strongly implied in the movie that he has Down syndrome. And apparently a nice kid, but he's the son of a cook who works at a summer camp, and she's always concerned that she might do something. He wants to do stuff the other kids are doing, wants to jump in the lake and swim and all of this, but she's afraid for leaving him alone because he's not the sort who can take care of himself, his disabilities and all. He's all anxious and excited, but he doesn't have the full mental capacities that the other children might have, or has some other disabilities. And so she wants to make sure he's seen after. And gosh darn it, those teenage camp counselors whose responsibility is just that, to make sure everyone's safe and okay, they're more interested in committing the act of fornication. Yes, they're too busy exploring each other's orifices and therefore preoccupied, and the little boy goes swimming by himself in the lake. He doesn't take his buddy with him. He goes in the lake, no buddy system. He forgets. He's too excited and glub, 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 drowns, apparently, in the lake. And, Mrs. Voorhees goes freaking mad, both angry mad and crazy mad, and decides to blame it on those nasty camp counselors and their constant fornication and probably drinking and other things they do to put them out of the proper mind frame of watchfulness and mindfulness of their children, which is the job they're being paid for. And so she decides the best thing to do with those camp counselors is to slaughter them mercilessly, which she does quite lovely. It's a bit of a surprise. Oh, I spoiled it. Bit of a surprise because we don't know who's killing until the end, and then we find out. And the one girl who didn't do drugs, didn't drink alcohol, didn't have premarital sex, didn't, make the sign of the two-humped whale with other kids at the camp. She's a good girl. She's the survivor. She lops Mrs. Voorhees' head off with a machete. Now, part 2 came out next year. Part 2 reveals Jason didn't really drown in the lake. Where was he all this time? Why didn't Mum know about it? God only knows. That's a big plot hole. He didn't really drown, apparently. He grew up in the woods, living in a shack somewhere. All this time, Mum doesn't even know he's still alive. Grows up, looks very different than what we'd expect. He's got a big head of hair on one side of his head. The other side's kind of bald. No longer looks like he's got Down syndrome. The people who did the makeup effects said, we didn't want to make people think he was some kind of, that he had this problem. It would be offensive to people who actually have this disability. So they do make him look a little bit weird and deformed, but not specific to any particular type of mental illness and or disability. And so he's mad because he saw the girl lop his mum's head off. I guess after all that time in the woods, he decided to come back and say, hey, Mum, I'm not dead. Oops, you're dead. Damn! And so he goes after her and then starts killing anyone who shows up at Camp Crystal Lake, wearing a bag on his head. Yes, a bag. It's not till part 3, which was in 3D the next year, that he actually starts wearing a hockey mask and now looks like the Jason we expect, bald, kind of deformed, but now completely bald again, and is the Jason that has become the classic version starting in part 3. Part 4, he gets killed, and I'll cut back to the story of Jason in my next video, which I think is probably part 5, unless I've got miscounted. Until then, have fun. Oh, by the way, it's Cinco de Mayo. Arriba, arriba, andale, andale. Yes, been watching too many Speedy Gonzales cartoons.